This is Meet the Author, and I'm your host, Tigner Rand. Joining me today is Candice Marie Benbow. She is a theologian, essayist, columnist, and an educator whose works gives voice to Black women's shared experience of faith, healing, and wholeness. In her debut book, Red Lip Theology, for church girls who've considered tithing to the beauty supply store when Sunday morning isn't enough, Candice invites us to discover freedom in a progressive way. The book is a tool for young Black church women. It allows them to sit and be honest about themselves. It allows women to think and explore the boundless possibilities they can become when they live in their faith. Candice writes powerfully about the experiences at the heart of her Black womanhood. She talks about sexism in the church, the ways to embrace alternative spirituality, and the womanism theology. She also confronts attitudes on body positivity, such as LGBTQ rights. Candice challenges us to reimagine how faith can be a tool to liberation and transformation for women and girls for today. Without further ado, I would like to welcome today, Candice Benbow. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I am really excited to be here.
I am too. Before we get started, this is the book.
It is.
This is the book. Red Lip Theology is currently available on blackbookstore.com.
Yes.
So if you have not picked up a copy, please consider going to blackbookstore.com to get you a copy.
Yes.
This is a believable book.
Thank
Candice
you.
was very transparent in the book. She talked about herself. And oftentimes, writers, us as humans, we have a tendency to try to shade reality.
Right.
I have to commend you. Candice was very transparent here.
Thank you.
In her book.
Thank you.
The Red Lip Theology. With that being said, what inspired you to write this book? What was the backstory behind why Red Lip Theology and you had to birth this book for everyone to read?
So Red Lip Theology actually came out of a moment that in which I was in seminary at Duke Divinity School, also reeling from a really bad heartbreak. And my best friend, Shalita, came to visit me, and I just was looking like what I was going through. And Shalita told me, she was like, "You don't look like my best friend anymore. Like, this isn't good." And she made me promise that I would wake up every day and put more effort and energy into how I looked. And I remembered feeling like even if I didn't know how to be better or feel better, I still had to honor the promise that I made to my best friend. And so I'm in seminary. I'm also teaching at the time at a local college. And so I'm actually like waking up an extra 45 minutes to put my face on.
That's
and I actually, if you can believe it, have gone from 45 minutes to it only takes me 15 minutes to do a full.
Oh man, yeah. That's a hand.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have gotten down. Yeah. And so I was very, very committed to marrying these ideas of faith and feminism and an authentic understanding and articulation of who God is to me and who God is for young Black women. And so I am one of those who, it frustrates me that when you look at research data, Black women are statistically the most religious demographic in the country. And yet when you look at who are the religious voices, they're not largely Black women. And so I was like, that has to change. Like, when the sisters need to be given permission and tools to be able to know that they can trust the sound of their own familiar to articulate and formulate a theology and a personal relationship with God and the divine that really affirms them. And so that's how we get to a moment where Red Lip Theology is in the world.
Man, you said a mouthful, and there are 3 rabbit holes I could go down, and now I'm kind of like, okay. The first one, I have to ask this question. When you mentioned that you wanted to honor your friend and to really get behind her encouraging you, you made that sound easy, when I know in reality how hard was that to make that transition, because there are too many brothers and sisters out there who are going through whatever, death, broke up relationship, and they're really going through depression but don't realize it and just curl up in a corner like a baby. How were you able to make that transition and make it sound so effortless and easy?
You're right, it wasn't easy. There were days that I just was like, I can't believe I'm here again. Like, I can't believe I'm brokenhearted, disillusioned. Like, I can't believe I'm here again. I thought that this was going to work. What pushed me, I think, was the sisterhood that she and I had, where I knew that it was coming from a loving place. Like, I knew I wasn't good. And sometimes other people telling you that you're not good really helps to force you, I would say, to do better. And when you love somebody, and when you know that they love you, them calling you out and saying, just take some steps to get better. Like, it doesn't have to be, for her, it was like every day, just try,
Wow.
It wasn't, you gotta, it was just every day, just try. And I think too often, so many of us have memories of people who were that for us. That was like, look, you ain't got to figure it all out today, but just take a step. And at the time, I didn't know that was depression. It was only until my mom passed and I really got into therapy that I was able to mark moments in my life where depression was present, and that was one of those moments, right? So I'm grateful that she was there to graciously walk me through a really difficult and tough time. And then I'm also grateful that I, on the outside and other side of that, I had a therapist who was able to help me get the tools I need to be able to see when those moments come present again, how I can identify them and then navigate them differently.
Yeah. Okay. The biggest takeaway from what you just said would be, we need to make sure we have a true friend that's in our corner, not just someone who is going to be enabler to allow us to wallow in our own misery, but confront it. Hey, Candice, you're looking bad. You need to get up.
Exactly. It's so funny because I was telling somebody, I said, we were talking about friends and we were having a conversation about enablers. And I was like, I guess God had like ran out of enablers that day, because like all my friends tell me the truth, whether I want to hear it or not.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, but I know that it comes from, it can get tight and I can be in my feelings and I can say I need a minute because y'all done made me mad. But I don't have people in my life who cannot tell me the truth, and I bristle and refuse to hear it. Like, these are people who have prayed with me and for me in the worst of times. They've celebrated the good times with me. And when they call me on something, like, it's the truth. I might not want to hear it then, but it's the truth. And so we don't get to the kinds of people that we're supposed to be without people who can help us to, one, see our growing edges, but then to also tell us that it's possible to be better, and that we are not the worst thing that we've ever done. We're not the worst behavior that we exhibit, like that we are this beautiful amalgamation of all of these things. And sometimes we can lean into the more destructive things than we do others. And we need people to be like, hey girl, like your slip is showing. You smelling yourself. Humble yourself. And he's like, okay.
That's real talk. That's real. And likewise, you know, brothers need to do the same thing. As a people, I think that Black people have gotten away from that. Our parents, our grandparents, our forefathers were able to do that in a very constructive way, which I believe is what got us to where we are now. But when you look at a whole generation now, if you say something to someone, they get upset about it or offended. I'm just trying to help you because you're my sister. And because I feel that that's the Christian thing to do. I suppose, hey, I've done it to strangers. Some have received it, some have not. But at the end of the day, that's really what part of what we're supposed to do.
But you know what, Tigner, part of the problem though is that when you talk about generationally, we were also a generation that grew up hearing all about this whole hater theology, right?
That's
and
true too. Yeah.
every preacher was talking about haters. Let your haters be your motivators. You know, they hating on you, don't worry. Like, and so what happened was that any kind of critique got filtered through the lens of, if you are critiquing me, then you're obviously a hater. Like that you're obviously jealous
Good point.
of where I'm going, right? And so it's like, no, I'm not hating on you, right? I'm not hating on you, but accountability isn't hate, it's accountability, right? And so we have had such a me-centered theology. We've had, you know, I was telling I think the best way to describe it for me has always been, how did we go from the song, I Need You to Survive, to God Favored Me, right? That like this moment of that the collective is how we can make it and thrive, to it's about me, God favors me, right? And that is the shift in our theology that now has us to a moment that when you say something, people bristle. And that now you are dismissed as a hater. Now you're dismissed as somebody who is just jealous. Now you're dismissed as an enemy, when it's like, no, sis, no, bro, like I want us all to thrive. And you can, we're not perfect. We're not perfect at all. Yeah.
At all. It was once said that church is trying to fit into the culture, opposed to allowing the culture to fit into the church.
You know, it's funny because I think that for whatever reason, church and culture forget that they're both institutions that have always, in some way, shape, or form, influenced each other, and rightfully so, because people are churched and cultured, right? So like that, you know, I talk about in the book, I was as much formed by the church, Black Baptist church culture, as I was hip hop culture, right?
Exactly.
Like, that they were together for me.
That's a good question. I read that part, and same way growing up, how it's not easy to differentiate between the two, where the church tells you, well, you can't live into the world, be of the world. But we walk in the world every day. You with the school, every day. You with in the community. even if your mother didn't turn on a secular radio, you heard it somewhere walking down the street, at a friend's house, at school.
Absolutely.
But I guess the key is really the true foundation of how you were brought up and taught how to create a foundation that you're able to withstand the arrows of the world, the darts of the secular world. Which
and I mean, it's not, and I think that's why a book like this for me was important, because it was like, look, I grew up in church, and I also grew up for a very long time believing that Luther Vandross was my daddy.
I love that part. See, and the funny part is your mama never did deny it to a certain extent.
She didn't. Like, I mean, she never came back and was like, so he ain't your daddy. Like, what happened, it was this, and it was funny to me because I knew he had to be important, because my mother, even though she knew secular music, like, she never really sang it. Like, there are two things, and it's one of my favorite songs now, since then. But as a child, that you remember when the commercials used to come on, that like you could buy like the Columbia Records discography that had like 30 songs and all that stuff. So one of those came on, and the Staple Singers "Let's Do It Again" started. And my mama was cleaning, and you know how they play the snippets, and she was like, "Let's do it in the morning. We breathe in the summertime." And I remember being
mama had a flashback.
What is my mama singing about? Like, I remember being like, oh my God, that song and anything by Luther Vandross, like, my mama stopped. And if Luther came on, she sang Luther. But my mama also was the most prayerful, the most faithful person that I ever saw and ever knew. I come from a family, I wanted 17 grandkids. My mother had 6 kids. Her 2 sisters had 6 kids themselves and a gaggle of grandkids. So, and my granddaddy had 5 brothers and sisters. Our family, our cookouts, random cookouts always turned into family reunions. And so I was listening to everything.
Exactly.
And I never was made to feel like people who didn't listen to gospel or people who didn't go to church. In my family, I was never made to feel like they should be ostracized. But it was when I was in church, you can't be of the world if you doing da 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 da. And I was like, no, there's no delineation between these people just because they're not listening to gospel, just because they're not listening. My grandfather, my entire life, I never knew my granddaddy to go to church. He would watch Fred Price every Sunday morning. Evidence, he would watch Fred Price. I didn't learn until years after he passed that my grandfather is actually the reason that St. Stephen Missionary Baptist Church is our home church. He was there. He was active in church, and my grandmother came and joined that church. But he left because he said it's more crooks and it's more hypocrites in the church than outside of the church. And I don't have to be connected to a church to be a good, fundamental, God-fearing man who is good in my community. So I never knew my granddaddy to go to church, but I knew my granddaddy loved God. I knew my granddaddy would give you the shirt off his back and would open the cabinets and give you all of the food if you needed it. So I say that to say that the problem with the church believing that institutionally it has to be superior to culture and all of these other institutions negates the fact that people have always been living at those intersections. And it negates the fact that there have been some people who've been harmed by church who felt the need to walk away And it doesn't mean that when they walked away from church, they walked away from faith. It doesn't mean that when they walked away from church, they walked away from a commitment to humanity, right? It means that they realized that this particular institution is harmful to me. And rather than be a part of a harmful institution, I am going to go somewhere where I'm loved and I'm cared for and honor that part of me. And I don't think we talk about that enough.
No, I agree with you 100% with that. And I think personally that a lot of that comes with when churches get caught up into religion. You know,
Yep.
we get caught up into religion, and I think that more people have run away from God because of what you just said, because of the religion, and we become judgmental about the attitudes and the preconceived thoughts about a person. Oh, she's this, or he's that, or
right.
But at the same time, God told us that we're supposed to love everyone.
Everyone, right?
Because
as yourself, right?
Exactly. If he who has no fault or sin against him cast the first stone, there's no one in the church should be not who could cast a stone, because everyone has sinned.
And you know, it's so funny that you say that, Tigna, because that's part of when people ask me about the kind of vulnerability and transparency that I brought to Red Lip Theology. That's the point, right? Is that like when you are grounded in the ways that you have lived contrary to who you were called to be, and God gave you enough grace and room to come to yourself.
Yes,
and
hallelujah.
Shift and be different. Like there should be a moment, right, where you extend that grace to other people. And the truth is, I didn't always do that. Like I was one of those like, ooh, how could she da 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 da? Oh, that's messy. How could they da 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 da? And then when I found myself in a pig pen, and I had to look up and be like, I actually need you to wash me. Like I actually need you to get me together and get me better. Then when other people make similar moves, or when other people's downfalls are public, it shifts my conversation because I've been there. And the same grace that was available to me to get me together is the same grace that's available to somebody else. And dare I ever negate that for them?
Yes. Beautifully said. One of the things that I remind people, because we don't think about it, is that we're so quick to cast judgment. But in the first thing that you learned in Sunday school was what? The Lord's Prayer. And in the Lord's Prayer, it says, and forgive us of our debts as we forgive those who trespass against us.
Right. And
so basically it's saying, if I can't forgive you or forgive you for what Candice did and Candice's behavior, then how can God forgive me?
It absolutely, like it's not only that how can God forgive me, it becomes the arrogance of I deserve forgiveness, but you don't.
You don't.
Right?
Yes.
Like that, it becomes the arrogance of, well, mine wasn't bad, right? What you did is just whoosh. I wasn't that bad. You know, it becomes
a sin is a sin is a sin.
Right. It becomes that kind of arrogance. And the truth is that God is looking at all of us like, all y'all down there doing the most with the least.
You touch in your book on a lot of things, and you don't say this particular what I'm getting ready to say, but it falls in the same, it parallels to this. I've heard pastors, and it really hurt me because I had looked up to them. They were great orators of the word. They knew the Bible, but they were willing to forgive a prostitute, a rapist, a murderer, and an adulterer, but could never forgive a person who was gay. And I'm sitting there like, I'm confused.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's unfortunate is that there are so many limited understandings of human sexuality, that I tell people all the time, the worst place that I could learn about human sexuality was the church. Because I
Yes.
mean, because there are people who are taking what they consider to be very literal interpretations of scripture written at a very
Yes.
different time
Yes.
and applying them a to a current people and a current and it doesn't mean even then that we don't interrogate what was said then, right? Like that, like I tell people all the time, like enslavement and slavery was just as wrong in scripture as it was when we were enslaved in the Americas. Like no person, no human being deserves to be owned by someone else. Like, but when it comes to queer and same gender loving people, the way the church has wielded heterosexuality as some kind of power and moral superiority, for me, and I talk about it in, the essay Survived by a Special Friend, it really robs us of honoring how intentional God is and God has been and can be with creation, right? That if I say that God created me and all of my particularities, I don't get to now say that that's not true for somebody else who's queer and same gender loving, right? One of the things that I heard, I didn't talk about this in the book, but it was so I don't think I did, but Bishop Yvette Flunder said one day at an event I attended, she said, "I am a same gender loving woman because it is the will of God for my life."
Mm.
And when I heard that, stopped in my tracks because I'm like, wow, like this is somebody who understands that sexuality is not the totality of who any of us are, but it is a part of the canvas in which God created us.
Mm-hmm.
And that it allows us to live even more into our truth and to recognize the intention and the compassion and the creativity of God. And I want to live in a world where we are less concerned with who people sleep with, and we are less concerned with who people love, and we are more concerned with whether people love, if people love, right? Like I
understand what you're saying.
I want us
It's
to
so much
care more
hate.
about that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's so
So
much
much
hate.
hate.
Hate
So much
because
more
of
hate.
the color of your skin. Hate because of your hair.
Yes.
Hate because of your size. Hate, hate. Like, where is God in any of this?
Exactly. And we look to so many people especially Black folk. We live in an anti-Black world that is intent on diminishing our power and our respect. And we want so much for people who we want love. We want affirmation and acceptance, especially in our communities, and about people who look like us, because when we go outside of our communities, it's few and far between. And so if that's the case, more often than not, why can't we find it?
Yeah.
And why have you decided that just because I in a world where we can't find love, I found it, and you're mad and you're resentful because it looks different than what you believe it should? Like,
yeah, you're right. It's so funny when you really start studying the Bible. Most of the people, like the description that you're defining people, they're no different than the Pharisees and the Sadducees.
Absolutely. We would have very much stoned Jesus.
Right.
I mean, and here's the thing. Jesus had some very, like, I tell people all the time, Jesus was a very interesting character. Like, Jesus went away, fasted, heard from God, confirmed in his call, went back to his hometown, walked in the church, opened the scrolls, read that basically was like, you welcome, I'm here. Like, I'm saving y'all, good day. And they looked at him and was like, that's Joseph's son. Like, what he finna do?
Now, that take it a step further, he did those things, but once he realized that you were not going to receive it, like when he went back to Nazareth, oh, that's that carpenter boy son. What he gonna tell me? Oh, okay. I tell you what did it say? He never came back again because your mind is already closed.
Right.
You're not gonna receive nothing that I'm gonna tell you.
They tried to throw my guy off a cliff, right? You know what I'm saying? And he gets to a point where he's like, look, you don't want the conversation. You don't want the transfer. You don't want to be challenged enough that would inspire change. So because you don't want that, there's no need for me to be
waste
here.
My time.
Let me go and talk to, and what the church does not understand is that the exodus from church is from a lot of people who are like, y'all don't want to shift. Y'all don't want to see other people's humanity. You want a specific kind of conversation. You want a specific kind of Christian. You want a specific kind of family to be on your pews. So we gonna go, right? That's the same sentiment. That's the same sentiment.
Yes, you're absolutely correct.
And so now we're in a situation where, and I love the church. I talk about that in the book. Like I love the church and I push it to be its best self. But we're also in a situation where there are some people who are walking away because they don't care anymore. And if too many people walk away, what you got? What's left?
Yes. Anarchy.
You have an institution that is just no longer viable. And, I don't want that. Like my mama felt me kick in Mercy Seat Holy Church. That's why it's always going to be holy. The church is always going to matter to me. My grandmother worked in church her entire life. It's always going to matter as a space to me, but it matters for the church to recognize that there are people who want to have new and different conversations that lead to full healing and wholeness.
Yes.
And they have to be open and ready for that.
Yes. I think where the church fails, especially churches who are stuck in religion, stuck in their tradition, is that we don't want to meet people where they are. Mm-hmm. 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 The homeless man on the street. Sometimes the homeless man is not necessarily wanting food. He's no different than the man at the beautiful. He wants more than just the alms. I want something else. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't know what he wants. But then all we come to, they just want $1. No, I want something else. Mm-hmm. I had one to tell me once, and I was guilty, and I never forgot it. She always was angry and bitter. You could see bitterness on her face. She said she stuck her hand in, and I said, I don't have any money. And she goes, yes, you do. And it caught me off guard. I said, I don't have anything. That's what I said. She said, yes, you do. And I stopped and thought, I said, what do I have? She said, you can always pray for me. Ooh. I said, you know what? You're absolutely correct. And we started praying right then. And from that point on, that's when I realized it's like, just because that person is where they are, I got to meet you where you are. Not because what my mind said is, oh, they just homeless. They want food. Yes, they want something to eat, but at the same time, they're still hungry for something else. Mm-hmm.
Just like we are.
Yeah. So I have to be bold enough and willing enough to find out what that is, but then it becomes trust. You got to trust me first, because you're not going to accept me. I can't come in holier than thou. Right. At some point, I got to do what Jesus said. What? Let my light so shine so that they can see.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we're in a moment where it causes, especially when we have lost 800,000 people plus due to a global pandemic. We are in a moment where we have to be hands and feet of Jesus in a very different way than we've ever been.
Yes.
And people have questions that they are struggling with. I have lost more people personally than I ever want to know that I lost to COVID.
Wow.
And to the point where it was like my grandmother was telling me somebody died every other week.
Wow.
And I had someone inbox me who was going through a very similar experience, and they actually lost both parents and several family members to COVID, and asked a very pointed question: where is God in all of this? And I remember sitting with that for a while before I answered it, because I mean, if you read the book, you know I'm not somebody who believes that we have to define pain for purpose, and there are ways that a lot of people have experienced horrors and griefs that other folks will never know and never experience.
Yes.
And so I took a minute and I told that person, I said, to be honest, I don't know. I said, I know that God holds our hand and God walks with us through the valley of the shadow of death. I said, but I am with you in that I know that this could have been prevented because God is just that big and that good and that intentional. But my question is never, why did God allow? Where is God? But the gratitude of knowing that even in the darkest moments, God holds my hand and walks with me through them.
Amen.
And part of what I hope people get from this book is, as you ask questions, as you go through things that were outside of your control, as you walk through the implications of a decision that was in your control, that you don't ever do that alone. You don't ever do that alone. But you do that in the company of a God who cares. You do that in the company of ancestors who guide you, and who help to steal your path. Like, there are moments and times where I've heard my mama's voice. Mm-hmm. There are moments and times where I wanted to have made a decision and I got a feeling, and I knew it was her, right? Like, there are times where I've needed to hear my aunt, and I just get in the kitchen, and my aunt's favorite cake was yellow cake with chocolate icing. And even if I don't eat it and give it to a homegirl, when I need to hear from my aunt, I get in that kitchen and I make a yellow cake with chocolate icing. Wow. And I hear and I get clear and I get still. That's important to me. And I think that we're in a moment where, as people are wrestling and trying to figure out where God is, what's going on, they're trying to stay safe. Like, these are still dangerous times, and they're trying to stay safe. That it matters for people to be like, hey, I walked this. I may not have walked your same path, but I walked the dark and I walked the sketchy one. And now that I'm on the other side of that dark and sketchy path, I can tell you with confidence, you don't walk it alone. You have good friends that walk it with you. You have loving family that walk it with you, and you got a good God that walks it with you.
Yes.
And if you have those things, you are never without. You are never without. And I hope that people get that take that away as one of the takeaways when they read the book.
Okay. What are two other ones that you can add to that? That'll be something that this, like, in 30 seconds, if you could say, hey, this is what you need to just capsulate in this book that people can just take away.
Two things: that it is okay to bring your whole self to your relationship with God and the divine and center that. And 3, that it is okay to find and incorporate joy and humor and the things that you like. It is okay to bring those into your life, that after that you can have experienced a really difficult time, but life can still be lush and beautiful.
Oh, I like that. Say lush and beautiful.
Lush and beautiful.
You are a sister, a Black woman who I would consider to have superpowers. What would be your superpower?
Whew. See, and I'll be thinking that we got superpowers, but I think if it is my my desire and my need to feel it. I have a thing on my desk that says, if you're not feeling everything, you're missing everything. And I never don't want to be in touch with my emotions, whether they are good ones, whether they're frustrating ones, whether they're sad ones. I always want to honor what I'm feeling, and sit with that and make decisions once I'm able to know what I'm feeling and honor that. So I think that would be, if I had to say I had a superpower, it would be that.
Okay. What makes a good friend?
What makes a good friend is someone who's compassionate, who's empathetic, who cares about you, who makes you laugh in the most difficult times, and somebody who can see the best in you and help you get there.
Okay, now I'm gonna ask this question one more time. This time we're gonna say what your mama said the answer gonna be. What makes a good friend?
Jesus.
All right, that's the answer I'm looking for. So you give me that. Okay, now this, I need that answer.
If you ask Deborah Benbow, if you would have asked Deborah Louise Benbow what makes a good friend, she gonna do just like that. Jesus.
That's like, I'm expecting this, and she give me this long list.
No, you asked me what I say makes a good friend.
All right, you're right.
But if you would have said, what would your mama say? That's it. Jesus. And she would have said it just like that.
From your childhood experiences in the church, you talked a little bit about some of the negativity, how women were portrayed throughout, church growing up. Has the church changed any, or is it still the same? Or
there's still churches that require that you apologize for publicly apologize for being pregnant. There's still churches that refuse to do baby dedications to children born of unwed parents. There's still churches where I can hear sermons. I can pull up a sermon every Sunday where women and single mothers and queer people are demonized in the sermon for whatever reason. So in that instance, no, it's still the same place. We have more women in leadership than we've ever had before. Yes. And we also do have pastors who are trying to be different and trying to make changes. So that is the case, and that's happening. But yeah, we do have people who are not doing all that they could do to make church safe. And we're still fighting some of the very same battles we've always been.
Do you think that's a denominational thing, or is that just church universal?
Yeah, that's institutionally, because white women deal with sexism and patriarchy in church as well. There are issues of homophobia and queer antagonism in white churches, Latino churches. So culturally, we're still dealing with the same kinds of things. So it's not denominationally, but it is the institution of the church, and the ways that the ways that the institutional church embodies a certain kind of power politic. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. When did you know that God was calling you to ministry?
Ooh, I always knew. I'll
Oh,
be
wow.
honest. Like I always knew. The danger was that I knew I wasn't a preacher. I have preached and I can preach, and I preach for friends when they ask, who are pastors, when they ask me. But all I saw growing up in church were women preachers. And so there wasn't I never saw another way to be. And when I saw that way to be, I always knew I was a writer, and I always knew that whatever God was calling me to do, it was through the pen, and through my notebook. And so it wasn't really until I got to seminary and I was able to be around other women who were theologians, and then kind of marry the theology with writing and find a space there that I was able to feel a release in, like, okay, I got it. But I always knew that my work, whatever work I did, centered God. I always knew that.
Okay.
Yeah, I always knew that.
What is your greatest or proudest moment as being a theologian of achievement?
Oh, it's this.
Okay.
I think that this is for me to see this in the world, because it's hard to write about faith and feminism as a Black woman. And there were many times where I just was like, I don't want to do it. There were many times where I was defeated and felt defeated. And so to see it in the world, I don't think that I have had a professional accomplishment that really tops this one.
Wow, that's good. Why did you said that you didn't want to do it? What was tugging at you to make you not want to do it? Even though I know, based on what I've read from the first chapter, that was something of passion that was there. So what was a stumbling block?
A lot of it was just the vitriol that you can get by just writing in ways that try to hold the church accountable to itself. As a writer, as a public theologian, I've taken a lot of hits, and those were just articles and blogs that I've written. But to write a book, and to put your flag in the sand in that particular kind of way is a very different space. And it was hard. And there were times that I really wrestled with what it meant to tell this kind of story. Even though I needed to tell this kind of story, there's just that kind of fear. But, grateful for a therapist and good friends who are like, nah, you gotta tell the truth, and you gotta tell it. And so, yeah, I think that kind of fear created the hesitancy, but then it also propelled it. It also propelled it because when I was writing, I'm like, no, I was like, the more I wrote, I was like, the more I gotta write. And so I'm just so grateful to see it in the world. It's been in the world since the 18th. And whenever people see this, we recorded this on that Friday, so it's been in the world for that's Tuesday, Wednesday, for 4 days. And on Thursday, yesterday, sisters were already inboxing and emailing me I finished it. It's amazing. I'm about to start it again. I'm like, girl, did you work today? Like I had on Tuesday, there were a couple of, I had to put up a status because I had received so many DMs from sisters who were like, I have not done anything since I started listening to this audiobook and I'm at work. And I'm like, now sis,
you still gotta work. You gotta work.
I can't take care of all of us.
Right. You can't get mad at the man and say, I need you to leave. Like, well, I'm reading this book. Okay, right. I know you're reading this book, but I need you to go to work.
I can't take care of all of us. So I need you to put that book down until you get off work. So wow. But it's just been so amazing and such a, I don't have words. And as a writer, people laugh. I can tell. People laugh when you say feeling. Like we're speechless. Yeah. I'm just deeply, deeply grateful. Like I'm just, I was up this morning and I was like, I want to stay in that posture of gratitude because that's where I am. I'm just deeply, deeply grateful.
That's awesome. If you could thank any Black woman for her contribution to history, society, who would that be and why?
Ranita Williams. The Reverend Dr. Ranita Williams is the first name that came to me. She was the first Black woman to get a PhD in Old Testament studies at Princeton Theological Seminary. But why I say that is because Ranita Williams wrote about God and Black women in popular press. And she wrote for Essence and she had all of these books. And I grew up in a home where my mother read Dr. Williams and she would cut her Essence articles out of the magazine and put them in her purse. And I said, I wanted to be to my generation of Black women what Ranita Williams was to my mama and to her generation of Black women. And so that was the first name that popped up when you said that. I want to always give her flowers. Yes. Because without her, there is no me. There is no me.
Wow. Your mother, reading what you wrote about your mother were some profound words. Reading it was like, she would seem like it'd be a fun person to be around. She wasn't going to take no mess. She's going to keep it 100. And she's going to tell you, but at the same time, God is in the middle of all of this. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, that's what I see in my mind's eye, you know, and she didn't try to sugarcoat it with you, but at the same time, she didn't want to divulge too much information based upon your age, which makes sense, you know. Yeah. You know, we need more mothers and parents like that in our society. My mother was like that too, but you know, you don't hear a lot of women, you know, who were that strong. You know, they knew how to talk without raising their voice. You know, they could give you that look, and you knew what it meant.
Yeah, she was a special woman. She was a great mom. I'm definitely grateful to. I am incredibly blessed, and I know that not everyone has that same experience with their mothers. Mm-hmm. What I did learn after my mother passed is, going back to the original conversation about grace, is that, you know, I do believe people tried their best, but I do believe that there have been some deep wounds that have harmed people. Like, and I think some of those wounds are why my daddy is absent, and why there are fathers who are absent, right? And so what I hope is that as mothers and daughters read this book, they get space to understand each other more. And daughters find ways to give their mamas grace. Mamas find ways to give their daughters grace so that they can understand each other more. Those who have very tenuous relationships with their parents, whether it be a mother, whether it be a father, whether it be both. I hope that they find space and room to know that it's possible to hold them accountable, while also still knowing that, while also still praying that grace finds them wherever they need it. You know, that's where I am with my father. Like,
Yeah.
you know, he and I talk about it in the chapter where I talk about my dad. Like, he's supposed to be here, right? You know, he's supposed to be in my life. The fact that he wasn't, the fact that he isn't, is of no fault of mine. Like, that is his.
Exactly. That's
all,
him. Yeah.
Whether I'm 4 or 40, right? Like,
that's
he
right.
is father, you know?
Yes.
I remember my mother one time, we had gotten into it, my mom and I. And then she said what she had to say and hung up. And I went on about my business and I was mad. And then like 3 hours later, she called me and we both love hibachi. And she was like, I'm gonna order about hibachi. You coming over for dinner? I was like, yes. And so then I came over and we ate and we talked. And I told her, I said, we just was at each other's throat 2 hours ago. And now we sitting here eating dinner. And she said, because you are called daughter and I am called
love.
Mother.
That's love.
And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. She's like, that's why you're called daughter and I'm called mother. So, so the grace that, you know, even as I hold him accountable, even as other people hold their absent, estranged parents accountable, I also know that God allows him to see the same sun I do. And God allows him to see the same 24 hours a day that I do. And God grants him, God hears his prayers just like God hears mine. And so I hope that, particularly because parental relationships can be so difficult to navigate, and they are at the crux of who we are. Like, you know, like I talk about, I'll say this and end it, but I talk about in the book how people talk about soul ties as having soul ties with people that you know, your intimate sexual partners. And my mom was like, no. My mom was like, my soul tie is with you. And I remember thinking about that. And I was like, yeah, like we have soul ties with our parents, because how they raise us, how they treat us has everything to do with the people that we become. You know, like I can get my heart, like, dude, that is the reason why my friend, why Shalita came to my house. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know where he is. I don't know, because we don't talk. I hope if he's still alive, I hope he's well. I hope he's thriving. But I can't remember his telephone number. I don't even remember his birthday.
You don't need to.
Exactly. So his imprint and influence in my life has already waned.
Yes.
Every day I look in the mirror, I see my daddy. Right? Like every day that I am alive because there was a moment that him and my mama got together and made me. There are ways that I encounter the world and I embrace the world, and there are ways that I maneuver very cautiously because of situations that I've endured with him, right? And that's for anybody, whether they are your biological parent or whether you have been adopted. When people come into your life as the parent and have a certain divine charge in guiding and shaping your life, they leave imprints.
Yes.
Like they leave imprints. And so a lot of this book is about the impact and the imprint that parents leave. Thank God that I had a mom who, even though, as none of us are, she was not perfect. Even when there were moments where she leaned into the desperation or sorrow or the frustration, as all of us may do. She still surrounded me and equipped me with love and
Yes.
never made me feel less than what she
Yes.
wanted. She never made me feel like it was never and that I was optional. Like it was, you are here, you are mine, and I am going to, and you will always be mine. And that shaped me. But just like that shaped me, there are some people who their experiences have shaped them differently.
Exactly.
And I hope that as people talk about all of those things when it comes to this book, I hope that parental relationships become something that people talk about as well and recognize the importance of.
Wow. I can talk to you all day. I know we got to stop. You say a lot profound, and to hear you talk, it is great. And I hope that some young sister, even a brother who might pick up the book, can gain something from that, because we see it so often in our communities that young boys and girls who are fatherless or motherless, they start blaming themselves. Why me? And bitterness seeps into their spirit. And your mother did the Jesus thing. I'm going to give you the love. I'm going to do the best of my ability. And just from talking with you, I know that she did a good job. She did the best she could with what she knew what to do with. And iron sharpens iron. So if, for wherever she fell short, she put you into the circle with others.
Yeah, she did. And she got that from her mama and her daddy. So
that's the full circle of what, in as layman terms that we can ever put it, that's the one thing that God wants us to do. That's the love. That is when you say, I'm loving my brother and my sister. I know you've been a badass, Candice. Like you say, I got a slick mouth. I know you was talking smack with your mama. Your mama ready to knock fire to you.
Whew, honey.
She ain't knock fire to you.
My thing was always with her, my facial expressions, and I would talk back.
Stop rolling your eyes.
And so
what you say? What you mama under your breath?
And so what's so funny is I told her, it was before she passed, and I said to my grandma now all the time, I said, now y'all gave me all of them whoopings for talking in class and talking back.
Look where it got me.
I said, do y'all wanna apologize? And both of them was like, no.
You knew you was gonna lose that battle. I don't even know why you even decided to ask that.
I just wanted to mess with them. I just wanted to mess with them.
Before we go, can you read a short passage from your book?
I will. I talk about this is from the chapter We Are Good Creation. The way I read it, the work of creation was an act of love. The omniscient, omnipresent, sustaining force took the time to make one of the most significant things it ever would. The Holy Maker called every single aspect of the design good. It was good. It was right, majestic, glorious, beautiful, and in no need of tweaks and reconstruction. When God looked at creation, God saw necessary perfection. God saw a good thing. Necessary perfection, being a good thing, doesn't mean we are perfect. Just as God saw the totality of creation as good, God also knew creation would be trifling. Humanity, people would be trifling. People are trifling, doing the most with the absolute least. And yes, the biblical narrative is replete of examples of humanity fumbling the ball and God extending grace and mercy. We can look at our own lives and see where God has done the same thing. Yet that doesn't change the fact that God has seen us as only one thing since the beginning. God has seen us as good.
Yes, God is good. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been talking with the author, Candice Benbow, of her new book, Red Lip Theology. It's a book that I think that every sister should read, and brothers need to read it too.
Yes, thank you.
It does shed light. If you study the Bible and read the Bible, you can see parallels of how Candice ties in everything. You can't read this book without knowing a little bit about the Bible. You can't, because then you're going to go into what we've been talking about this whole conversation, how we get caught up into our own ideology, our own thoughts. But we have to find a way to utilize the book as a tool to better ourselves with our faith and our walk with God. Before we go, Candice, is any last words, or can you share your social media handles, how people can follow you?
You guys can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Candice Benbow. So that's CandiceBenbow. And my website is CandiceBenbow.com. Thank you guys for all of your support. Thank you for those who purchased it. Thank you for those who are going to purchase it. I am incredibly, incredibly grateful. Thank you.
Continue to be creative. Continue to allow God to use you as a voice, as an instrument. Let him pour into you all that it needs to come out for others to hear, see, and read. Make it a great day until we talk again.